Hello, friends. Chad here with Return of the Remnant Ministry. And today I wanted to do a teaching concerning Revelation. And today I just want to give an overview of Revelation. This is something I've been kind of chewing on for the past couple weeks. I'd like to make this kind of a three-part series. So today I just want to go over, just do an overview of Revelation, just to kind of get us back into the book of Revelation, if you haven't been in it lately. And then I'd like to follow that up with another teaching on how to take apart Revelation and organize it in such a way that it's more by sequence. We obviously know when we read Revelation, when we get into like Revelation 11, 12, and 13, they seem out of place. And I'm hoping that I can put those puzzle pieces in the right order so that it flows a little bit better. And it'll help people kind of see what's going on of what John saw when Yeshua gave him insight on the revelation. And then lastly, I'm hoping to get into some of the scriptures from the Old Testament that coincide with the things that John saw in Revelation. There are a lot of scriptures. For instance, I'll say this: how did Paul understand Second Thessalonians 2:4 when he's talking about the man of perdition sitting in the holy place? Okay, Revelation had not even been put out there yet, and my belief is that he understood Daniel, and there's some places in Daniel that talk about that, and then even Yeshua in Matthew 24 talking about, when you see the man of sin sitting in the place where he ought not to, let the reader understand. These things we can find in other places in the Tanakh, whether it's in Ezekiel, whether it's in Zechariah, like in Zechariah chapter 6, Zechariah chapter 14, Psalm 2, Ezekiel 38, Ezekiel 39. And so I'm hoping to get into that at a future time. But for today, we're just going to go over a brief overview of the book of Revelation, just to give you a good summary of chapter by chapter what's being talked about. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So chapter 1, obviously, is just an introduction. It's an introduction. It was written by John concerning what Yahweh Elohim, the Father, revealed to his son, Messiah Yeshua, who then gave that revelation to his angel to share with Yeshua's disciple, which is John, the author of this book. And keep in mind that these were things that took place in John's day and that would take place in the latter days. Now, chapter 2 and 3, it's the old chapters of the seven churches, or the seven kehillas, ecclesias, but more importantly than anything else, I believe there's 7 types of believers. There's 7 assemblies of believers, but we've always been told, at least in the last couple hundred years, that these are church ages. And if you examine these churches very, very carefully and take it to prayer and study it, I don't think they are. In my opinion, these have nothing to do with church ages. Rather, these messages deal with the state or categories of faith that believers like you and me are at, whether it was in John's day that Yeshua saw, but also throughout time leading up into the end days. We know that Yeshua's desire for us are to be overcomers, just like he was and he is. And each one of us have to self-examine ourselves to see if there's anything in there that needs to be burned out, any kind of sin, hidden sin, iniquity, anything like that. And there are some examples that Yeshua gives us that, there's a call back to our first love. We're to be encouraged to remain faithful even during the persecution. We need to be strong in faith. We need to beware of the false teachers that creep in and definitely can lead people astray. I can't tell you how many times I've seen, and I'm just going to say it. I know people may get a little uptight with me on it, but I have teaching on the Noahide laws, and that is not 100% scriptural. If you are a seed of Abraham, you are heirs, and you believe in Yeshua, you are heirs according to the promise. Or should I say, Galatians 3:29, if you be Messiahs, and you be Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. It doesn't matter if you're a Jew or Gentile, you are grafted in, as Romans 11 says, to the tree, in which the tree is Israel, the root is Messiah, and the Father is the one who prunes the branches and removes them and replaces them. And so there's no such thing as Noahide. That is something that came along during the Talmud and then Maimonides' day, but I'm not gonna beat that dead horse down. But that, in my opinion, is a false teaching, and it has led many people astray. And now they don't believe they have to follow the instructions of Yahweh. They just need to follow these 7 Noahide laws, and they're good. And that is a doctrine of demons. Sorry, that just is. If you have any questions about that, go onto the Return the Remnant channel and look for the Noahide teaching that I did several years ago. It's one of the most popular ones on the channel. We are also to not tolerate immorality. We should stay alert and strengthen the faith that is in us. We should be affirming our faithfulness to Yeshua, faithfulness to God and his word. And we should continue to stay on fire for the Lord. We should be continually working for the kingdom in some shape or form, whether you have the gift of evangelizing, or the gift of teaching, the gift of praying for others, and things like that. So we need to stay on fire for the Lord, and we shouldn't be backsliding into a lukewarm faith. These are just a few examples, but these, the chapter 2 and 3, I believe, deal more with the state a believer is in rather than the church age. Chapters 4 and 5, we have John has the vision of Father Yahweh's throne room and the Lamb who is Yeshua HaMashiach, and he is the only one. There's no one else in heaven or on earth that is worthy to open the scroll. So once we get through that, now chapter 6 begins the opening of the seals that only Yeshua is able and worthy to open. And chapter 6 deals with the first 6 seals. And again, I know there's some people out there that believe the seals have been opened, and they may have already been opened. I don't know 100% on that, where my mind is at right now, because keep in mind, in the days we're living right now, time seems to be speeding up. A lot of things are happening. There's an overabundance of information coming in. And right now it's difficult to keep up with things. And I think right now, as we get closer and closer to the end, prophecy becomes even more attainable, if you will. And everything is very fluid. And so many people like myself can attest to the fact that even though right now I'm giving you my overview of Revelation, there's some things in here that I think that I'm spot on with, or maybe correct with, or leaning that way. But maybe next week I may be looking at it differently. And that's how we have to keep this in mind. We shouldn't be like some teachers out there who have been dead set for the last 20, 25, 30 years, believing a certain way, even though there are a lot of things that have changed and they don't want to give it up. And we need to be humble, and we need to look at prophecy with some fluidity, if you will, and be able to say, hey, I might be wrong here, and be willing to change. And, don't fight the current, don't fight the current, go with the flow. So chapter 6, again, the opening of the 6 seals. And I think these seals, again, my opinion here, are going to coincide with the early career and rise of the Antichrist, along with the reshaping of the world and the worldly systems before he assumes full power. We read about the Antichrist in Revelation 13, and he's already at full power. Well, he just didn't show up and decide to sit sit in Jerusalem in the tabernacle or whatever and proclaim himself king and God, and God, if you will. He had to work his way up the ladder. I mean, if any of you work in business, you know, you start at one point, maybe you're just a worker and you work your way up, and next thing you know, you're a manager, and then you're the plant manager, and then you're on the board of directors and a CEO of the company. You know, you don't just automatically go to the top. I mean, now some places that may be true, but typically you start and you work your way up. And I think that's what's going to happen here. And I think these things that we read about in chapter 6, and I'm hoping in a future teaching when I talk about Old Testament prophets and other writings, I think we'll attest to that too, especially in Daniel chapter 8, 9, 8 through 12. In there's some areas where I think you, and maybe even 7, you see an early, mid, and late career of the Antichrist, and he has to rise to power. He just doesn't assume the Revelation 13 status. He has to work his way up, and I believe that's where these 6 seals come in, that with the wars and famines and conquering maybe through peace and things like that, the Antichrist has to work his way into power. Okay, chapter 7. So chapter 7 is kind of a break. We'll talk more about it in the future. But chapter 7 now, John gets this futuristic vision of the 144,000 that were sealed. And these 144,000 are 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes. And I know there's people out there that say, well, Dan's not in there. Well, I believe Dan is a typo. Man is a typo for Dan, like Manasseh. Because when you look at the listing, they are the 12 children of Jacob. And maybe in the future, maybe I can get to a discussion on that. And also later, the 12 gates in Jerusalem are going to be for the 12 children of Israel. So, I mean, Dan's going to be a gate there. So he has to be included here. So we're not going to beat ourselves up on that. But 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes, that's what gives us 144,000. And then interestingly, in chapter 7, in the middle of that chapter, there's a little break there. And it says, John says, and after this, after what? After this sealing of the 144,000, he sees after that, which is a future time after that, a little while after seeing that, John now sees this great multitude, and this multitude had to do something. It had to come out or go through the great tribulation. They're the ones that overcame. So we see that in chapter 7, 144,000, and then the remnant of overcomers. Chapter 8, now we see the 7th seal being opened, and there's a heavenly event. These 7 angels were given 7 trumpets. There's smoke of heavenly incense, smoke from the heavenly incense altar, are the prayers of the saints that was then thrown down to earth, which caused these thunders and lightnings and earthquakes. And this is the kickoff. This begins the blowing of the first 4 trumpet judgments of Yahweh. Next, we get into chapter 9. Chapter 9 spends a lot of time on the 5th trumpet. It's also called the first woe, where the bottomless pit is open. There's a star that falls from heaven. It's not a star like we see. It is an angel that falls out of heaven, who is given the keys to the bottomless pit, who is then opens that bottomless pit. He is authorized to open it. And this bottomless pit is now open, and these creatures that look like locusts, they're like chimeras, if you will. They ascend and they torment. They don't kill, but they torment those who took the mark of the beast. Now, if you look at this, now wait a second. We don't hear anything about the mark of the beast until Revelation 13. So we have something out of sequence here. And that's what I want to try and get to in the next teaching I do. But these are key words we look at and we say, well, wait a second here. You know, I know the whole book I read the whole book of Revelation, but I know this mark of the beast is not even listed until we get to Revelation 13. So something is out of place here. So here we see the 6th trumpet releases, well, the fifth trumpet releases what's in the bottomless pit out, including the king of the bottomless pit named Abaddon. Okay. And they're going to torment those who did take the mark of the beast, the mark of the Antichrist. It's just code for Antichrist when you see the mark of the beast, mark of the Antichrist. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too with the Torah portion Shekalim one day. We'll get into that. But anyway, the sixth trumpet is the next one in chapter 9. And it's going to release the four angels who are bound at the river Euphrates. So that tells you right there that these four angels are not good angels. They're the ones that are bound. Just like one day Satan's going to be bound for 1,000 years. These angels are bound at or below the river Euphrates. And they're going to be released. And they have this massive horde army of chimeras who are going to kill a third of mankind by fire, smoke, brimstone that come out of their mouths. And it's not going to be those who are the remnant, so to speak. It's going to be those people who took the mark, who are against God. Then we get into chapter 10. Chapter 10 is a little interesting too. Not 100% sure how that'll all play out when I try and organize this in the future. But we see an angel who comes down from heaven with a little book, which John consumes. And while he's consuming it, he says it tastes sweet as honey. But then once it gets into his stomach, it makes his belly bitter. And kind of interesting, might have something to do with Numbers 5, not 100% sure. Then we get into what they talk about the seven thunders. The seven thunders sounded, but what they said were sealed up and not written down. The angel proclaims with an oath that the time for what is on the earth and the things therein is about to end. And when the seventh trumpet sounds, the mystery of God will be completed, as he declared to his servants, the prophets. And one thing I think is interesting is when you look at these seven thunders, I believe they have something to do with the Bat Kol. And the Bat Kol is it's like the voice of God that we read about in scripture, where someone can hear the voice, others only hear thunder. And I believe that only believers, when this time happens, only believers that Yah chooses to make known are going to know what the seven thunders are. But to the unbelief, they won't know. It'll only be seven thunders. They will have no idea what that is. We'll be privy to it. Chapter 11. Chapter 11, again, is another interesting chapter. John's given a rod to measure whether it's the earthly tabernacle, temple area, however you want to look at it. And he's told not to measure the courtyard area, as it's given to the Gentiles in the holy city for 42 months. One thing I want to just share, we have a place here in scripture. We have people that say, well, we're the temple of God. And, I understand that. I get that. But in order for the Antichrist to make himself believe that he is the ruler over the whole earth and that he is God and that everyone's going to worship him, there has to be something up on the Temple Mount, okay, that Paul understood, that Yeshua understood. And I know there's a big debate on this, whether or not there has to be a full temple. Well, listen, the Temple Mount Institute already has all the implements they need, with the altar of incense, the tabernacle, the table of showbread, all these things. Now, and I also believe there's a place where all the implements of the tabernacle are still hidden. But at the end of the day, it won't take very long for the brazen altar to be set up. And after 8 days, it will be confirmed. It'll be holy after 8 days of continual Tamid offering sacrifice. And during 8 days, a tent can easily be set up. I mean, David had a tent in the Old Testament. He had a tent where he housed the Ark of the Covenant of Yah. And so there will be a place where these things will be. And keep in mind that with all the machinery and all the things we read about, that I will be reading about a little bit, with the merchants of the earth and how they were made rich and all the stone and wood and gold and silver that are going to be flowing in to end days Jerusalem, and all the manpower and workers, and machinery, it wouldn't take long, conceivably, it wouldn't take that long to put blocks, cement blocks, however you want to look at it, to make a structure. It would not take that long. It doesn't have to have a structure in the very beginning, but I think after 3.5 years, you could have something quite formidable that would be made up on the Temple Mount. And as you see here in John, in chapter 11, John is measuring an area. He's measuring an area. There's a physical place where this stuff is going to go. So, I mean, that's where I'm at right now, folks. I think there's going to be, at the very least, a tabernacle set up, and you will have, with the ashes of the red heifer one day, this is just more according to Judaism, my thinking, that once the ashes of the red heifer is burned up, they will, when they are able to get the Temple Mount back, they will take the ashes of the red heifer, and according to Jewish thought, they will sprinkle the ashes of the red heifer over the entire Temple Mount area to make that kadosh, to make that holy. And, you know, things are going to have to happen to get things removed off of there, to have a sacred space. Again, I don't have all the answers on that, but I believe that in the future, something like that's going to happen. The offerings will start back up again for a period of time. And if you're looking at timelines at all, the only thing you have to really remember is when that Tamid offering stops. Once you know that the Antichrist is in charge and the Tamid offering stops, because it says he causes the oblation to cease, that is your countdown. That is your 1260 countdown. That is the most important thing. This whole thing about 7 years and this and that, the most important thing to remember is the 1260. That's the kickoff. And it just so happens, as we're here in chapter 11, it'll be the exact same time when the two witnesses will start their testimony against the Antichrist and his system. Those 1260 will coincide together. And it's the same that we're going to read about in chapter 12, when Israel will have to flee, the woman who is Israel will have to flee into the wilderness. Those 1260 are all the same beginning indicators. 1260, 1260, 1260. Antichrist assumes his role up there in the temple, I guess you could say. The two prophets of Yah, the two witnesses, will begin their prophesying. That begins 1260. And Satan and the Antichrist is going to go after the remnant of Yah's people. And for 1260 days, that's it. That's how it starts. All three of those events, I believe, happen at the same time, the same hour, the same day. So back to chapter 11. John is given a rod to measure the earthly tabernacle temporal area, and he's told not to measure the courtyard area, as it is given to the Gentiles in the holy city for 42 months. And that's the same thing we hear about in Revelation 13. The Antichrist will reign for 42 months, 3.5 years. Now, during this time, as I said before, Yahweh's two witnesses will be on the scene to witness against the Antichrist and false prophet for the same period of time. Time times and half a time, 1260 days, 3.5 years, or 42 months. After the witnessing is finished, they're going to be killed. And in my opinion, it talks about who came up out of the bottomless pit. That's Abaddon. Abaddon is the one that'll probably have the authority, I guess, to kill them. And they're going to lay in the streets. We read about this for 3.5 days, but then the Father calls them and raises them up back to life and brings them up into heaven. And at that same hour, a great earthquake is going to occur in Jerusalem. And then we read about that this is the second woe. I mean, all wrapped up into one. So that sixth, maybe that sixth trumpet might be the second woe. So now we get into chapter 12. Again, something out of place. We'll talk more about it in the future. Chapter 12 talks about this war in heaven, something that happens in heaven. And Angels that are loyal to Satan are going to be attacking and fighting the angels that are loyal to Yahweh. And Satan is going to be defeated in heaven, and he's going to be cast to the earth with his angels. And we read about how they're going to go after the woman, who is Israel. And who is Israel? It's those people who keep the commandments of Yahweh and hold on to the testimony that Yeshua is the Messiah. We read about that in Revelation 12:17 and also in Revelation 14:12. And that's going to also happen for 1260 days. That Satan and his evil angels, along with the Antichrist and the beast system, are going to try and kill the remnant. Next, we get into chapter 13, and this is what I was talking about before. This is where the Antichrist comes to full power, but he has to make his way up the ladder to assume that. He just doesn't come on the scene. He's all of a sudden full power. Things have to happen. We read about that in several places in Daniel. So with the help of the false prophet, the Antichrist is going to rule for 42 months. Again, 3.5 years, 42 months, 1260 days. Same timeline, in my opinion. During this time, the image of the beast, which is the Antichrist, is going to be set up, and anyone who doesn't worship the image is going to be killed. Or they're going to try to kill him, right? Nobody will be able to buy or sell in the Antichrist system unless he or she has the mark of the Antichrist or the number of his name on the right hand or forehead. And then we get into chapter 14, where we have this heavenly scene where John sees the 144,000 not on earth. They're not on earth at this time. The 144,000, it says they're in Mount Zion, but it's heavenly Mount Zion. We look at it in verse 3, you'll see it. And they're singing before the throne of God. The throne of God is not on earth. It is in heaven. And they're singing a song before God, a new song that only they know. And then we also read these 4 angelic proclamations in chapter 14. The first angel is flying in mid-heaven, and he's saying to the inhabitants of the earth to fear God and give him the glory. Worship him who made heaven and earth. And that goes right back to Genesis 1:1. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va'et haaretz. The second angel shouts, anyone who takes or who's took the mark of the Antichrist is going to face the wrath of God. Next, we have another angel who shouts for the harvest. And you remember a few weeks ago, I did a teaching on the harvests of Yahweh. He shouts for the harvest of the righteous remnant. This is when the rapture occurs for the saints. This is what John saw in the second half of chapter 7. He saw the 144,000 who were sealed. And then after this, he saw those who came out of the great tribulation. And what is the great tribulation? The great tribulation is not seal 5. The great tribulation is the 1260 days. The same when the Antichrist takes full power, when the angels come to the earth to make war against Israel, and the 2 witnesses prophesy. The 1260 days. That's the most important countdown for us to remember. Then we have the 4th angel in chapter 14 who shouts for the harvest of the wicked. And they're going to be placed in the winepress of the wrath of God. And you know what a winepress does? It squeezes, and it's going to pour out the lifeblood of the wicked over the earth. Next, we have chapter 15, which is an introduction to the 7 plagues. And the overcomers who are now in heaven are going to be playing and singing the song of Moses and the song of the Lamb. They're going to be acknowledging that Yahweh is true and just. And after the angels have the bowls of wrath, they're going to come out of the heavenly temple. Then the temple doors are going to close until the 7 plagues are finished. And that, to me, is very much a theme or reminiscent of Yom Kippur. Chapter 16, we see the first 6 plagues are going to be released on the earth. The wicked on the earth still did not repent, and they blasphemed Yahweh Elohim. Interestingly, the 6th plague is what dries up the Euphrates River so that the kings of the east will come, that they will cross over and come. Also, there's going to be 3 unclean spirits that come out of the mouth of the dragon, who's Satan, going to come out of the beast, which is the Antichrist, and come out of the false prophet. And what they're going to do is they're going to deceive and gather all the wicked kings in this huge, huge, great army to battle against Yahweh and his anointed one, Yeshua HaMashiach. And you can kind of get a flavor of that with Psalm 2. This is all going to set the stage for the Gog-Magog battle, the first one, which is going to be Ezekiel 39. And there's people out there that think Ezekiel 38 and 39 are going to happen, really soon. I believe this is going to be a lot bigger than what they think. This is something huge. And where's this going to happen? It's going to happen. We have in the Bible Armageddon, okay, but it has more to do with the Valley of Decision, and that Valley of Decision is around Jerusalem, or you could even say the Mount of Decision too would be Jerusalem, the mountain of Jerusalem, and that's what's going to happen. The Gog-Magog battle, they're all going to come across the Euphrates and other places. They're going to surround Jerusalem, and that's going to set the stage for the Gog-Magog of Ezekiel 39. 39 is going to come before 38. When you look at it, you'll see why. Several reasons, and maybe one day I'll do an in-depth teaching on that. The seventh plague that'll happen now, as 6 plagues are done. Now the seventh plague is going to send a great earthquake, lightnings and thunders, very similar to what we read about earlier, but it's going to cause the cities of the nations, so all around the earth, to fall. And then Mystery Babylon is going to be remembered for her iniquity. And then a plague of hail is going to fall on mankind. If we look at chapter 17, this is going to be an in-depth look at the destruction of Mystery Babylon. So there's going to be kind of a break here, and we're going to go into a whole lot of details of what happens with Mystery Babylon. And the description of the mystery city, I believe, can be end days Jerusalem. I mean, this is the place where the Antichrist is going to rule and reign from. It's going to be where all the merchants are going to flock to. Chapter 18, an angel descends to the earth to proclaim that Babylon has fallen, and all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So again, back in chapter 14, we see about the wine press, that harvest, that's the wine press of the wrath of God. A second angel proclaims, "Come out of her, my people, do not partake of her sins, that you might not receive her plagues. This great city where merchants became rich is now destroyed, and the merchants wail over her." A mighty angel, then we see, picks up this great millstone that's in heaven, and he casts it into the sea, and he compares it to the destruction of the great city Babylon being thrown down, just like that millstone. Chapter 19, we see that the remnant, those that are in heaven right now, there's joy in heaven over the judgment upon Mystery Babylon. That heaven opens, and Yeshua as king descends on the earth with all the saints to battle against the Antichrist and the kings of the earth. Okay, I got to look at something. Give me just a second. Okay, yeah. Okay. This is still Gog-Magog battle number 1. I don't know how I put battle number 2. So back here, when you look here in chapter 16, what's happening here is this is setting up the stage for the Gog-Magog battle number 1, which now takes place here in chapter 19, when Yeshua as king descends on the earth with all the saints to battle against the Antichrist and kings of the earth. This is Gog-Magog number 1 battle. First battle, Ezekiel 39. And we know that the Antichrist is defeated, and the kings of the earth were killed, and the Antichrist and false prophet were then cast alive into the lake of fire. Next, we get into chapter 20. After that's done, Satan is now taken. He's bound for 1,000 years, and believers are going to rule and reign with Yeshua on earth for 1,000 years. And then after that 1,000 years are up, Satan's going to be released from prison, is going to go out and deceive the nations around the world to do battle against Yeshua and believers. And this battle will be the second Gog-Magog battle that occurs here. And if you look at Ezekiel 38 gives all the details of why Ezekiel 38 would happen at this time after Ezekiel 39 and not the other way around. We know several places in the Tanakh, in the Torah, and in the Tanakh where some things are out of place. And and something happens in the future in one, and then later in the past in the other. And so I think in Micah chapter 4 and 5 is a good place to look at that, where there's going to be something wonderful that's going to happen. And then a few verses later, the author talks about what needs to happen for what he just said to take place. I hope you can understand that. Meggido Adair teaching I have on there is a place where I talk about that. So this second battle is going to be a battle that the Father is going to take care of personally. So after Satan deceives all these nations and they come into the land and surround the land and get ready to destroy it and take plunder, Yahweh the Father is going to send fire out of heaven. He's going to consume them all. And then Satan will then be taken and thrown into the lake of the fire where the Antichrist and the false prophet are, and they will be tormented forever. After that happens is what's called the Great White Throne Judgment, where those who are not raised at the seventh trumpet are now going to be judged, whether they're in the book of life or not, and it's going to be according to their works. And those not found in the book are going to, in the book of life, are going to be thrown into the lake of fire. And this is what's considered the second death. And then at the end, we're now in the 8th day. In the Hebrew thought, it's new beginnings. And we're going to have a new heaven. We're going to have a new earth. There's going to be a new Jerusalem. And the author goes into great detail what New Jerusalem looks like. And Yahweh the Father is going to be there along with Yeshua HaMashiach, his son. And they will dwell with us, with the saints, for all eternity. And chapter 22 has some interesting scenes in it that kind of reminisce you back to the early chapters of Genesis with the imagery of the Garden of Eden. So that is what I have today. And I'll try and find a place on Google Drive and put this PowerPoint up. So if you'd like to save it and have it for yourself, feel free to make changes to it. Again, this is just kind of where I'm at now. And I'm sure I'll be tweaking it until Yeshua comes. So that's what we got this week. I hope this was good, a good overview for you. Stick around. I'll try in the next couple of weeks to put together how we can break this down into more of a sequence of events and where the details of those events are at within Revelation. So until we meet again next time, may you have a blessed week, and God bless.